So this is going to be the first of my Wickedly Divine Lightworker Chronicles, which I might shorten to WD Lightworker Chronicles, or maybe WDF. I don't know, because that's a lot of characters, and I don't know. We'll see. So this is something. I mean, I felt called to do it for a little while, but I didn't have a name for it, and my intuition just said, hold on for a little bit. You'll get the rest of the cooperative components, as is divinely timed. So a couple of things happen. Oh, a dragonfly, really huge dragonfly. It's too bad it didn't come in here, right? So I want to say, first of all, I'm probably going to put at least half as many of these Lightworker Chronicles in the members only section. Some will be in the $2 section, and some will be in the $10 section. Partly because of sensitive information. I don't want to share a bunch of information about a whole bunch of people and things like that. And this information is to help. It's to heal. It's not to out anybody or do anything like that. So it does touch on a lot of big topics, and also, if Sand sees this, one of her readings helped confirm for me. It was really funny, too, for my Sagittarius rising, confirming something that I felt coming on my path for a while, and partly it was asked for, and partly it was already there before I knew about Abraham Hicks or Bashar and stuff, and I just was not brave enough. I didn't trust myself enough to be able to follow it, and now I'm in a place where I'm like, oh, you know what, that does sound like an enjoyable experience with all sorts of new contrast. And I don't know what the ups and downs will be, but I do know that in getting into such types of channeling, and with my own proclivities mixed in with the messages that I'm getting from the, I want to say beings that are coming to me, that they're going to touch on some hot topics that I have kept quiet about. I don't know if I'll mention them all in this episode, but they're definitely there. And I guess more or less I'm trying to figure out, like, I have a certain sort of kind of a superpower to be able to say things about certain subjects that help both sides recognize that they're both being great and awful to each other. And I'm trying to make use of that, because that's a little bit of my light work. I'm also sharing this video for those of you that are on a similar journey, or want to be, or feel called to be, and also just because I'm kind of the permission giver in the way that I'm willing to make mistakes. Now, before I go into today's events, I want to say that I realize there are a number of things that I have not had time to fully learn about yet, and that there are some cultural and spiritual differences to various different topics that might trigger some folks. If you do feel triggered and you want to offer me some correction of information, that's fine. If you're feeling triggered, you can go ahead and leave something in the comments. I'll only interact when it feels like it's going to be an up level for both of us, because in my experience, any arguments, there shouldn't be a win or a lose or stepping on anybody else. It should be both people up leveling. If there's a win or lose energy to it, it's both people lose, you know. So, and also, I want to learn more about this information. So if anybody else, I have a feeling a couple of you who will watch this may have already gotten some information, and I'm doing my emotional labor to really look into all these issues. So if you know of some of them, or you want to look it up too, and you find something cool, please feel free to come and put it in the comments, or tag me in it, or whatever you want to do. That's here on YouTube and on TikTok as well. I am somewhat on Instagram, but I don't have room on my phone right now for all of these apps, so I'm not on there very much. And as always, you can text me, email me, things like that. So, now that this has started, I want to say I'm going to start this just talking about the light work element. I don't know if I'm going to allow the being to come in that wants to work with me, or the beings, just yet. At least not on camera. I don't know. We'll see. I'm still at a place of negotiation. You should always negotiate, just like you do with people. You should always try your best to vet these energies, and this one has been doing that. That's, I think, what makes me amused about it, is like, you want evidence, you want proof, you want this, you want to see that I mean, it's safe, relatively speaking, because my spirit is one of those protector spirits. And there's another part of the, okay, you know what, I'll share this part. This is a part of my practice of embracing the absurd. And what I want to say is that I recognize what I'm going to say for some people is going to be like, wow, that's awesome and magical. And for other people, it's going to be like, she crazy. I'm okay with both. Like, I like my world feeling magical, and I I love this stuff. So whether you feel called to it or not, doesn't bother me on it. Although I am somewhat still, like, I'm seeing some vestiges of some old self-consciousness in it. So bear with me if this is a little bit longer of a video, or if I'm a little more circumloquacious, like, to get to the point. So a couple of days ago, some energy came to me that reminded me of, there's a lot of people that talk about they feel like star beings, and I have no problem with that. And it's that there's a lot of people who have felt like that. Especially in my experience, I've noticed over the last like 10 years an increasing amount of people saying that they feel like they don't belong here, to terrestrial, to Earth. Their souls don't feel like they belong here. And I totally get that. It's interesting though, because I have not yet met anyone who feels the way that I do. I'm sure that I will. This journey might just take me there, because I have always felt like I am terrestrial to Earth. Like, my soul has been one of the, I want to say, original Earth beings. Like, it's always traveled on the Earth, and some of the crazy spiritual experiences I've had and things that I've done and stuff like that really just resonates with me. It's a lot of earthiness. Now, I am a Capricorn sun, so I'm also thinking, I wonder if that is a part of it. I don't know. Either way. So I had a couple of downloads that came in yesterday that created some connections. The funnest of which is that, oh, it's so funny to speak it. See? I'm like, I don't even know why I'm necessarily nervous. I say all sorts of crazy shit on this channel. But you know what? I like sharing genuine human emotion. I like sharing the humanness, even the smoking and stuff like that. So what I'm being told, and what I suppose I'm giggling that I have any trouble speaking about, is that I'm being told that I was one of the original, like, my soul was one of the original creator beings of Earth, like came here and stayed here, and that I'm being called to connect with that ancestry, and that the entities that are connecting with me are actually, I want to say, older versions of me. Like, it's like my ancestors, but it's actually my incarnations. And like, so it's both. And it's like, it's not that I've necessarily, like, my soul is infinite and is the original connection to that, but I played out, I've been in different lifetimes that have played out various different roles of humanness and humanity, which partly explains some of the claircognizance, where I know things that either I haven't really fully done the research of. A lot of this happens in readings. Like, I tell people, I'm quite Gnostic and claircognizant. You can ask me a question oftentimes that I don't have information for, like in terms of book knowledge, and I can give you an answer, and you can go look it up, and it is accurate. It freaked me out for a long time until I met some elders who experienced that, and then it was like, oh, okay. So I'm not completely crazy. This is a thing that other people have experienced, and oftentimes that makes us feel better as humans. I think that's where I'm getting to, is to where I'm getting much better at just affirming, like, if experience comes to me, I don't need to affirm that anyone else has had it. It's okay to be the first. It's okay to be the pioneer. And now that I think about it, that matches in, because astrologically, as I've been telling folks, we are in an alignment that is very, very similar to the Great Depression and the American Revolution, and a lot of times before then, when there's been power versus people sort of dynamics. And so, yeah, so the connection is like connecting to all the pieces in there that are me, and the being that, so it was about 8 years ago, actually, that I first had this connection to this being. I wasn't ready to go there, so I thanked it, and I said, I'll come back to you when I'm ready. I had intended to a lot sooner, though it tells me it's okay, because time is not linear, and this is part of why I can have this experience, because I've removed enough layers of ego to get to where I'm light enough in density to connect with the non-linear time in terms of accessing people. And I've actually read about that a fair amount too. There's some authors, I'll have to go look up the books because I can't remember the titles of them, but that talk about similar experiences, especially in South American cultures, indigenous cultures. So what's interesting to me is that the being told me to call it yoke, Joik. And at first I kind of thought, oh, that's funny because it sounds like joke. You know, I thought that it was pronounced joke too. And I thought this is interesting as a name. And I went to look it up because this was part of, like, for me, this was like spiritual vetting with other beings. And I'm like, okay, I'll go look it up. And where it led me to when I did the translation of it was to the Sami people, Sami, the indigenous Nordic peoples, and some people believe that there also are indigenous to Celtic people, Gaulish people, things like that. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of information available online yet about them. I did follow the rabbit hole, and I learned a fair amount, but it was mostly like government census and stuff. And then, so it was interesting. So when Sand did her reading and confirmed for me, okay, yes, all right, I know I made that connection. I was like, okay, who am I supposed to connect with? And Yoke came right back in. It was like, me. And I was like, oh, it's y'all. Okay. And I might refer to it as he for a fair amount of time. It feels like it's multiples in there. And I know I've had former incarnations that have been masculine. It's part of karma stuff for me to have both the balance in there, kind of that. I hesitate to use the term two-spirit, though I don't have another language. I don't have another word for it just yet. In any case, I went and learned about as much as I could. Now, a yoke is basically an indigenous spiritual song. It's chanting that the Sami people do. And it's funny because even in my mind, when I went to look it back up today and yesterday, I realized how many people have suggested that in one form or another, that I go and learn about these people. And I did at the time, but it was such I didn't have all the cooperative components. I didn't know all the whys and the hows, and all the information was not quite there yet. This is one of the reasons Spirit often says you don't need to know everything right now, because in 3D reality we don't have it all out there just yet, and there are times when we can't access the information or we can't talk to the right people. So, you know, don't toss the baby out with the bathwater. If you get some information and it doesn't make sense, just journal it or put it in your pocket or something for later. It'll, and just have faith you'll get the pieces as you're ready to, and as the information is available, because we're co-manifesting this collective reality. That's part of what makes it fun, interesting, and unpredictable. Well, not completely unpredictable. Obviously, we're predictable enough to have formed astrology and psychology and things like that, but you know what I mean. So, what's interesting, though, is that when I looked up a yoke, it was connected to something that I had learned in a indigenous ceremony that I was invited to participate with, where there was some bonfires before and after, and I found I had a natural calling and ability to kind of perform a magic that had to do with chanting, and there wasn't specific words. And then I found that I was really called to there's a song, the only title I've ever seen for it is the Eastern Medicine Singer's song, I believe from the Navajo people. It's on YouTube, and like I asked around, I asked many elders, I asked many people, like, what does this song mean? Like, it feels like it calls so deeply to me, and many people respond so vibrantly to it. And it was explained to me, at least thus far, I'm open to learning more, but so far the journey of it is that it's there are many songs, especially spiritual songs, that don't have words. They have vowels. They have, we use vocalizations, but they don't have words, and they don't have to have words. And not everything has an explanation. And then there's the amount of, white culture has gone through and destroyed a lot of information that could have explained that stuff by now. And here's the really interesting connection to this with the joke thing. So I've been trying to figure out for a while, like, why I feel so called to indigenous American cultures. And the reason I question that is because I don't want to culturally misappropriate. I don't want to be rude. I want to help heal that stuff. And also, I know that there's more to it. I think a lot of people stop there and go, I feel really called to this, so I'm just going to take it on and do it, which some of that leads to good, some of that leads to bad, all of it leads to learning. But like, you know, and I have been that person somewhat in the past, but I wanted to know, like, why is it there? And I mean, I talked to my biological family, and there is some connections to the Snohomish tribe, but it's through marriage, so it's not like I don't qualify myself as least consciously having Indigenous American blood, and I don't want to claim on that mantle because so many people do it and abuse it. And but my point is, though, there's a connection in there, right? And I know that I've done historical research about my Gaelic ancestors and Celtic ancestors, and I know that many of them traveled over here before Christopher Columbus and had actually formed relationships with Indigenous American tribes. I'm like, okay, so I know that there's another connection. There's more going on there. And so when I learned about Sami people, what little there was available, I saw there was a connection in there. Though I was really sad because there wasn't a lot to learn, right? So then when the stuff came up again yesterday and today, and I'm like, okay, look, before I agree to this, I want to learn some more and understand, because I knew there was significance. The name Yoke was not, they told me it's not a name, but it's what we want you to refer to us as for right now, and you'll understand at some point. I don't know if the name will change or what, but I'm gonna go with it. It feels kind of cool to a degree, except for some of the stuff I've learned. I'm having some moments, all right? So I went and I decided to look it up again, because at first I couldn't remember what culture was it. I was like, I know it was an ancient culture, but I couldn't remember what culture. And then so I looked up Joke again, and it led me to the Sami people. And I was like, okay, so then, you know, it was talking about sacred songs. I'm like, okay, good. And I tried to look a little more online, and there wasn't a lot more about yoking. And so I was like, okay, so there's not a lot of information on Google. What are my other resources? And I thought, you know what, TikTok's been pretty amazing because it's people to people. And there's been a lot that I've learned about a lot of cultures that Google pulls out of the algorithm. I don't get to see it, and I can see that if I intentionally look for it, and you know, on TikTok, on YouTube, and other places like that. So I went and looked, and what I found, and then I went back to Google and I went through YouTube, was that the Sami people are, so they're Scandinavian indigenous peoples, and there's a lot of white ancestry going back to them. They've been around for thousands of years, and what really got to my heart was that they have been, so part of the reason there's not a lot of information is because the people, I make the connection to Romulus and Remus starting Rome, because I don't know where the outside cultures necessarily came in, but I know that they were clearly ran through the filters of Rome and the colonizing energies that we've seen since then. And I did a video about that on TikTok, if anyone wants to follow that rabbit hole with me. In any case, what I saw was that these, you know, new cultures came in, and they started doing forced sterilization of the Sami people. They made them change their clothes. They would punish them for speaking their native language, for yoking, for doing all of that stuff that we are now seeing the backlash for, and the unearthing of what went on with Indigenous Americans for a long time. What still goes on, for that matter. There's still doxing with it. There was reports of a boy, an Indigenous boy, who had his braids cut by other kids in the school and stuff. I mean, this stuff is still happening. And then even when you look at wider issues that I'll touch on later, but I mean, anything where there's being violated, it all has to do with that same colonizer energy, that same, we're going to end, you know, we're going to erase you, we're going to erase your culture. And this is stuff that's been creating the imbalances of power with all of us for a very long time. And so when I was looking on TikTok, I was, you know, it's funny, I think where it was somewhere in my mind, I was thinking, well, this is a white culture, and most of the world has been set up to support white cultures, so it's probably praised wherever it's from. I wasn't expecting them to also be in this situation, and the worst thing about it is, like, they're not really allowed to be vocal about it as much. They're getting out more now, I think, with the internet and TikTok. I was happy to hear from some people speaking about what reality is like for them, especially because a lot of them have gone through all this conditioning, and they had a lot of their culture erased too. It reminds me a lot of the what was the thing that happened in 1978? The ghost dance, where indigenous peoples of America were shot down for saying, no, we will practice our religions. And a lot of, as far as my knowledge to this moment, if not for the Lakota who went deep into the deserts where white men could not survive and saved the sweat lodge and saved some of their culture, they would have lost a lot of their very, very sacred practices. And for the Sami people, it's very similar. I don't want to say except they have less, because it feels like it minimizes what's going on with indigenous Americans, and I don't want to say that. What I want to say, though, is that, like, even looking at the percentages, it's like when we talk about why it's so important to fight and to speak up and to participate in ending and dismantling the imbalances of power, the racism, the genocide with indigenous Americans, like, it feels to me like the Sami people are an example of why. And then it's also an example, too, of where we need to be really careful, because governments are run by people. And at least the last, like, what, 4,000 years, it's been, well, I might be off on my numbers, but it feels like at least that amount of time that we've had this very colonizer, consent violating kind of culture among the white cultures that ascended from Rome. And there might be stuff before that, but that seems to be the pivot point that I keep getting led back to, is that moment. And especially because of all the conquering that happened after then. And like, there might have been stuff that happened before that, but because of what they did, and because of what all the Caesars did, and then when it became the Vatican and stuff, the erasure of all sorts of religions, there may have been situations like this before. I mean, I know that culturally most indigenous tribes did war with each other, but it was never seen to the scale that Rome took it to conquer all and to create this big integration in it. I know there's little pieces of that if you learn about the Incas and the Mayas and the Sumerians and the Babylonians and stuff, but it's not to the scale that Rome took it. Now, and then on top of that, because Rome took on Christianity and forced that too. So here's where an interesting connection goes. When I was learning about what's going on with the Sami people, it's primarily like the modern Nordic people who have been oppressing them. And I know that those lands also went through being conquered, conditioned, retrained, and taught to basically oppress themselves, which is a lot of what we see now, and a lot of why you see a lot of POC and indigenous individuals speaking up about this stuff. And then we're uncovering and learning about all of the psychological factors, which the truth is, like, people in places of power have known about this. They've been perpetuating this. This is part of what Pluto and Saturn are coming to rectify and releasing that energy. It's why you're seeing a lot of stuff, and it's also why you should consider things that, like, it's governments, it's people who felt like they deserved to be the judges of what power was, including the mob, including the majority. And we can see what's going on with big things going on, that, like, they're trying to force people to participate, or force people to not be able to participate in medical procedures. And there's so many people that are like, well, you should just trust it because of the social impact. But the truth is, we've done this before. We've recycled this energy. We have listened, and we've been lied to, and we've been hurt. And there's been a lot of stuff that's gone on throughout all cultures. And we even in colonizer cultures, white cultures, we do it to each other too. And there's definitely plenty of reason for that reason to, question things, to look at things, to look at where you sit in balance with these energies and why you're listening to them, because we have this gigantic energy of codependence going on with each other. We need to be interdependent, not codependent. So, said all that to say, there was a video that came up on TikTok. And it's funny because I tried to put something on TikTok about this stuff, and my phone kept rejecting putting the video up. So I was like, okay, it's not meant to go there yet, and we'll wait. So what happened was, in my FYP, a video came up, and it was a Dutch woman who was explaining ritual that goes on in their culture, to where when you reach age 20, if you are not married yet, they tie you to a pole and douse you in cinnamon. To which she said herself, the amount and forcefulness of which depend on the morality of your friends, which already was scary enough. Now, she said something in the video about it's consensual, you don't have to participate, things like that, but I could kind of hear and feel, even in her own voice, that like, well, you don't have to do it, but there's definitely going to be social repercussions if you don't do it. And I don't typically speak up when it comes to other cultures, and other countries and stuff, though what kicked into my mind was a conversation with my dad about talking about his racism, where one of the excuses that he used was, well, other first world nations are very racist. And I can't argue with that. They are. There's a lot of them that are there. I have not been able to find one that isn't, especially white dominated and very racist. But pretty much all of them where we see, in, the people of the land. No, I can't even say that. It's since the Romans. I keep going back to that because there were peoples before that who were, at least we don't have them documented as being this way. So any country or culture that was touched by the Romans, including Africa and including China and Japan, they're all included. They were all touched in it. They were all wrapped up into whatever magic Romulus and Remus got into. and whatever unknown magics that I don't know about yet. So when I watched this video, I felt really called to comment. But I don't like being one of those people that comes and just says something like, that's really fucked up, or you shouldn't be treating like that. I'm like going, because I'm recognizing there's a lot of things that I don't know. But what resonated in my mind was it's very connected to Abrahamic religions, heteronormativity, and I am very well versed in the psychology of this stuff and attachment traumas, all sorts of things. And what's going through my mind is these poor women think that this is okay because it's been in their culture. She even said it's been in there for a long time, and I went and looked it up. This didn't used to be optional. And so if you think about it, they feel like it's okay and it's good fun now, and because it used to be forced and now it's not forced. And that shows a lot of, like, we've gone through a lot of that in our society in America, in that, like, it very, oh man, it's consent culture, and it really, for me, it brings up the rape vibes. Like, if you say no to doing something with someone sexually, a lot, and I'm including women in that. I know men that have been raped. I know, and I've had times where I've had other women do things that were not consensual with me too. We're all included in this. Even I've violated consent in the past when I wasn't conscious of it, not in a sexual way, but close enough. Like, I look at all consent violations as similar to that. We really need to be mindful of it. Now, I'm going to have to end this one pretty soon because my battery's low and I got to pick up my son. So where this connected was I decided to speak up and just say, hey, that seems really mean. I worry about those who get shamed into it, who this really seems like not okay. And somebody commented and said it's completely consensual. And I said, well, I worry about the subtext of what this suggests to women subconsciously in their 20s. And it said that when you hit 30, they do it with pepper. And she even talked about, like, and a lot of people know how volatile cinnamon is. Like, don't light a cigarette, don't wash with hot water. Like, you'll have irritated skin for weeks. And I'm going, wow. And like, this is the very example right now of we condition ourselves into it. We gaslight ourselves into it. I mean, I watched the video of her filming people doing it, and I'm going, what part of this is fun? Like, what part of this, like, I cannot find a connected reason in my mind for why anyone would do it other than peer pressure. Because it feels like if you don't allow people to do it, then there's going to be this undertone of energy that you didn't do the traditional thing, or it's kind of bringing it back in a weird sort of way. But like, I could see so many other ways to do it, and we have enough things in American Christian culture. I say, well, I'm not quite part of the Christian culture anymore, but I was conditioned with it growing up, but that are similar things. And we've been dismantling a lot of that. And I'm thinking, wow, there's a lot of work to do across the world with this sort of stuff. And it's not that anything needs to be fixed. It's very simply like, for me, light work is a lot of times just bringing a new form of consciousness to things. What got me, though, was that when I looked up the stuff with the Sami people, there was this connection there, because a lot of the tradition that the woman was explaining, it goes all around there, and it has since the Romans really went through and pushed Christianity and took out a lot of base cultures. And then I saw an interesting thing happen, is like my little comment on there, there's a lot of other Dutch women started coming on and saying, don't worry about the subtext. It's all consensual. And then I said, this is such an American moment, which is when I realized, wow, like it really, I had a moment with that. And I was like, American moment, what does that mean? You know, and because I know that I've seen on TV, like this whole like American moments, and I've not traveled outside of this continent yet, but I have traveled enough to meet a fair amount of people, and I've never had anybody, you know, be like that. Sorry, my battery's dying. I've never had anybody say that in that moment, and it kind of reminded me of like, okay, like this is somewhat of a mirror of like when somebody says colonizer or racist or something like that, and I'm like, think about it, going, okay, I'm looking at my triggers, at my reflection, and it's funny, the radio's every kind of people. And I thought, actually, like, what's the context of this? So they're talking about a ritual, kind of a doxing ritual of sorts, that is vestiges, at least. I mean, I don't know how thorough it's still steeped in like modern Abrahamic religions, but I know that it's at least the vestiges of it, and of sexism, that like, you know, patriarchal situations that we've had set up. And I'm thinking about like, look at how they condition themselves into it. You know, they just tell each other, oh, it's consensual. Oh, you don't have to do it. And they're talking to me, and I'm not, like, I wasn't bashing on anything. I was just, like, I was trying to figure out, how do I ask a question about this? How do I, like, I can feel some amount of light work in there, but I don't like to go and think of people as needing to be fixed. I don't mind, you know, and I'm thinking, you know what, where's my heart in this? My heart is not for the people necessarily that like feel convinced that it's consensual and they're doing it for that reason. I'm sure there are people who do like it. We're American. We do so many weird things, right? But where my heart went to is that I know there are definitely people, without looking it up, who don't consent to it, or who do it because they want to avoid the social shame. Because we have that same stuff happen here all the time, especially, unfortunately, for POC. And that made me think about, look at how we do this to each other. Like, this is us conditioning ourselves into it. And if anyone speaks up, they're made to feel like they're an outcast. And I even said something, I said, you know, because somebody said I would understand if I was a part of Dutch culture. And I said, you know what, I fully right now want to own that there's a great deal I don't know about Dutch culture. Like, there's a lot. That's why I'm trying to be sensitive about what I'm saying. That what I'm sensing is that this is not a cultural difference. This is a difference. This is about how the Romans came in with Christianity and created a lot of the imbalances of power between indigenous peoples and their people, and then and sexism. Like, it really got pushed. And I haven't looked back since that moment. I don't necessarily know that I need to, because I'm not trying to fix anything. I'm not even 100% sure what the meaning of having me say something was. It feels like it's more just that light work of bringing consciousness to, you have the option of thinking of it in a different way. You don't have to. But what I did also say to them before that was like, I somehow doubt that it's completely consensual for everyone. And in my mind, the connecting point is like, there used to be a time that I mean, I was so steeped in my own racist conditioning, colonizer conditioning, that if a person of color told me something, I would check in with, you know, white teachers, white friends, things like that, and be like, is this true? Because I felt like if what they were saying was true about how we were oppressing them, then I was an awful person, and my brain just could not handle it for a while. That's part of what they talk about when they talk about white fragility. And now I'm not in that space anymore. I'm not in the space of being that, and I recognize, like I still have. There's you don't get out of conditioning that easy. I just mean I don't feel fragile about it in that way anymore. And it helped in this moment of them saying it's very American, and I'm going, what's American about this? And I went, wow, you know what? It's about the fact that I can be a woman. I can be androgynous. I can be educated without being super wealthy. I can speak freely for the most part. I mean, that's getting a little more limited now with what the government's doing and all this stuff like that, but I still have a great deal of ability to think for myself. And this is where it links back to the Sami people. Because if we look at what was going on with the Dutch women and how they're pulling themselves into that. And then you look into the Sami culture and what's happened to them in Scandinavian regions, including where these women were from, is that it was quieted a lot faster and a lot better than our government's ever been able to do it. Because as you see, things like right now, like we get riled up about every issue, especially when it comes to any form of freedom or consent. And I'm actually going, you know what? I really, really appreciate that right now. As fucked up as we are as a country and as many challenges as we do still have a great deal more freedom than a lot of other places. And because of where we're at, we have been able to, I don't even know what to say because it doesn't feel like it's white culture that did it. It feels like a spirit of the land was stronger than the colonizer culture. And it was able to make sure that at this point in time, in this divine timing, the culture, the indigenous cultures, the POC, both who immigrated over here and who we brought over here as slaves, were able to keep speaking up, to keep bringing the spirit up, to bring light to these issues. And now we're seeing things going on, like with the unearthing of what was going on with the residential schools, that is still often going on. I actually, unfortunately, know somebody who adopted an indigenous child out here and has been the example of the kinds of people that got into residential schools, or the Mormons who adopted a whole bunch of indigenous kids and tried to teach them that being brown skinned or having being indigenous at all was like a mortal sin. Like these connections are in there. And so for me, I'm going, okay, now I get what the cooperative components are at the light work. I see the significance about why yoke was brought in there. I'm learning now as much as I can about these cultures, and I'm seeing how the colonizer mindset has done so much damage. One of the things that I've been worried about speaking up about is like this is what a lot of these beings slash older incarnations of me want to speak about, especially with all the Pluto, Saturn, Neptune stuff going on, because it is, how do I say it? There's a lot of people that are sensing an ending of sorts to the world, so to speak. It's not an ending to the world. First of all, if humanity was taken out, the earth would still remain, and who knows what would happen then, but the earth would be fine. But a lot of people are on this, like they're feeling the ending coming. So there's a couple of things I'm going to share about that. That are, at least this is what's being communicated to me, and it has been for a while. My DM even jokes because there's a song that he's been trying to send back to me that I wrote. He helped me write it, but I wrote it with a vision that I had back in 2014, when I was learning even about the stuff of 2012 and different stuff going on. And what it feels like and what I'm being told is that a lot of people misinterpreted the Mayan calendar, and I do know that that is true. And there's plenty of people that believe that actually they weren't saying that there was an ending, and it wasn't even that they necessarily ran out of room. They were saying that there was a space there before a new cycle began. And now that I've learned a lot more, like I already knew a fair amount about tarot, but I've learned so much through this beautiful journey and being on here with y'all and doing readings and coaching and stuff with y'all that I know more. And one of the things that I know about is like the Fool card, the zero. And when you go back to the root of number zero, if you want to call it a number, because people still argue about that, as it is the cosmic egg. And in the tarot deck, a lot of people mistake the Fool card as the first card. It's actually not the first card. If you look at it, it is 0. And what it is it's the space between. The Fool travels between the world card and the Magician card, which is the beginning of a cycle, the ending of a cycle. It's like infantry in infantry. I don't know why I said that one, but that's an interesting concept. I mean, being an infant into being, into maturing and going through these spiral cycles, as I've been calling them. Now, that to me is what is being channeled in that maybe I am doing channeling, that we're in the space in between. We're in that cosmic egg space. We've been in there a little while, and it's part of why those that have been maintaining power, both intentionally and unintentionally through conditioning, have been discombobulated because they're not able to keep power in those ways. Any sort of power that has been gained and maintained through violating people's consent, it has no stability right now. And the direction that we're going, that we've been collectively manifesting before we hit this cosmic egg period, was to rebalance that, to rebalance consent. And we're seeing that stuff go. And so part of the message is it's not the end of the world. It's not an apocalypse. There are some timelines, and if you focus on fear this whole time or your anxieties, you might line up with them. Though if you look at things from a higher perspective, you can avoid those and still do good work and still, enjoy the human contrast along the way. So I'm going to get off and finish this soon. But what it's saying is that it's not the world that's ending. It's not humankind that's ending. What's going on is that white colonizer culture is ending. And it's important to do your healing work in terms of that. Like, if you feel offended at me saying that, go in and look at, why do you feel offended? A lot of us feel offended because we feel like it was our ancestors that made those atrocities. But when we do that, we don't even stop to go, is it possible that I am perpetuating this? Like, a lot of people take a while before they get there and look at it, because there are a lot of ways we've been conditioned. Look at the Dutch women in the example that I gave. To them, like, there's already this sense of, like, this is normal, traditional for us. How dare you suggest that it could be wrong? And that's what a lot of us do here when somebody says, hey, you're oppressing me in your blindness and to your privilege. You're oppressing me in your inability to go do your own emotional labor and look up the authors and voices of color that have already provided lots of information, or the scientists of all peoples who have done all the work to provide accurate information. And we still have people doing this, even though, I mean, look at what's going on with the residential schools, and the Sami people are starting to speak up too. And there's a lot of indigenous people, I hope I'm saying it right, the Maori peoples, indigenous Hawaiians. A lot of people are speaking up. Like, Disney's been in huge freaking trouble for all the cultural appropriation that it's done. A lot of places are. This is basically the backwards forwards of how we got into this mess. So by having the white colonizer culture come in and decimate all of the indigenous cultures, now the rubber band effect, it's not necessarily a decimation in reverse. It depends on how you treat it. It depends on how you act, because anybody who feels triggered by me saying white culture, all of us, we are inherently racist right now. And no, other cultures, at least in terms of anywhere that white culture has power, cannot be racist. Reverse racism is hating your own culture. There's no such thing as an oppressed culture being racist towards others. And if you find yourself triggered at those notions, or you're like, oh my gosh, now this tarot reader's getting political, I'm going to pull away, I challenge you to simply look at that stuff, not because I need to change you, but because I'm telling you that part of this message is that there are going to be different timelines. And if you stay in the subconscious realms of not healing that stuff, not at least becoming conscious to what it feels like to somebody who is under the oppression of our cultures, then you're likely going to stay on the Plutonian path and find that things get a lot worse for you in your reality. It's a lot of, you get stuck in victim consciousness, right? And the same thing also in terms of if you are one of the cultures that have been oppressed, the energetic effect is like, don't stop fighting. Don't stop going there, but maybe change it from fighting. I don't know the right word. Like, it's ascending, because it is white culture that has taught all of us to get into this space where we get defensive and we start getting into rioting and things like that. And it's really understandable, especially when colonizer culture is all over the place. But energetically, you want to get out of their mindset. It's kind of like people that get into saying, oh, narcissists are everywhere and I want to avoid them. Problem is, when you're observing narcissists, you are stuck in narcissistic energy and also being narcissistic yourself, because who are you to judge that because somebody hurt you or didn't do things the way that you wanted to? How do you know that you are not also acting from the same trauma responses? Maybe you had slightly different experiences, but if you want to heal that stuff and you don't want to attract more narcissists, then you have to be the first person to have empathy. You have to be the first person to love them too, in the ways that you feel like they're incapable of. You have to get above and beyond that judgmental colonizer kind of attitude, no matter what culture you come from, that's been conditioned by this attitude, because it's that very energy that we decided collectively, the majority of it, to send away. And that is what is dying right now. It's giving room to rebirth, to much greater diversity, both power and non-power, to freedom, to all sorts of things. And it's far-reaching all across the world. And it's been happening for a while. Like I said, we've been in this cosmic egg for a while. And it's going to be seen increase. Like, if you're in fear vibes, then you're going to align with the fearful parts of this. I don't know what all things are going to happen. I know what I'm seeing happening. I know a lot of you are able to see what's happening, but I typically do not go looking for that information. I go looking for, where can I do light work? Where can I align with others doing light work and lift them up? Because it's not all about me. And how can I help see what is next? How can I help us get ahead of this manifestation? Because what we're seeing in this cosmic egg stage, where a lot of things are ending, is the old momentum of the old systems, and including, like I said, anybody feeling triggered in some of the stuff that I'm talking about. A lot of that triggering is it's your old incarnations, the parts of you that were your ancestors that did participate in this, and they don't want to lose power. And you also, another way to look at it, you got conditioned into it being in this way. Human beings, I don't care what scientific BS you might look at, we were not inherently born to be like this. Yes, there's stranger danger. That's a survivalist instinct, but it wasn't racial, and it was that situation was created. In any case, I'm going to go ahead and get off of here, and I will say more at another time. Thank you so much for all of you who have been listening.